The weekend of March 15, 2025, will be etched in the minds of many as a period of intense legal drama and political maneuvering. It began with a flurry of activity in a Washington, D.C. courtroom. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, and Democracy Forward filed a lawsuit. They aimed to halt the deportation of 5 Venezuelan immigrants. The lawsuit argued that the deportations, authorized under the Alien Enemies Act, were unconstitutional. Judge James E. Boasberg, presiding over the case, issued a temporary restraining order. This paused the deportations and set the stage for a high-stakes legal battle. Unfazed by the legal challenge, the Trump administration seemed to proceed with its plans. Even as the court hearing commenced, 3 planes later identified by their tail numbers N-278GX, N-837VA, and N-630VA, took off from Harlingen, Texas. These planes, shrouded in secrecy, were bound for Honduras and El Salvador, carrying a human cargo of deportees. The timing of these flights, coinciding with the court hearing, raised eyebrows and fueled suspicions that the administration was attempting to circumvent the legal process. As the planes made their way south, the courtroom drama intensified. Government attorney Drew Ensign claimed ignorance about the imminent deportations. His claims were met with skepticism by Judge Boasberg and the ACLU lawyers. The judge, sensing a potential disregard for the court's authority, issued a verbal order to return any planes carrying deportees. This order was later formalized in writing, valid for 14 days. However, by then, 2 planes had already landed, one in Honduras and the other in El Salvador. News of the deportation flights and the escalating legal battle spread like wildfire. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions. The hashtag #TrumpDeportation drama trended nationwide, reflecting the public's fascination and concern. The stage was set for a showdown between the judiciary and the executive branch, with the fate of the deportees hanging in the balance. The legal battle over the deportation flights intensified. The ACLU, led by lawyer Lee Gallant, argued vehemently against the use of the Alien Enemies Act. They claimed it was being wielded to target Venezuelan immigrants unfairly. The Trump administration, represented by Drew Ensign, countered that the president had the authority to invoke the act. They argued that national security concerns justified its use and the secrecy surrounding the deportation flights. Judge Boasberg, caught in the crossfire, expressed deep concern. He worried about the potential for a constitutional crisis. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, a different kind of battle was unfolding on social media. Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, took to Twitter. He confirmed the arrival of the deportees in his country. He even posted a video showing the deportees being escorted into a prison. His tweets, laced with sarcasm and defiance, directly mocked the U.S. court order. Bukele's tweets were met with a mix of outrage and support. Human rights groups condemned the treatment of the deportees. They questioned the conditions they would face in El Salvador's overcrowded prison system. Others, like Senator Marco Rubio, a staunch Trump ally, applauded Bukele's actions. They echoed the administration's claims about the deportees being dangerous criminals. The Twitter feud between Bukele and those critical of his actions highlighted the deep ideological divisions surrounding immigration. It underscored the real-world consequences of the legal battle playing out in Judge Boasberg's courtroom. The deportees, caught in this geopolitical tug-of-war, faced an uncertain future. They were pawns in a high-stakes game of power and ideology. At the heart of the deportation drama lay a controversial piece of legislation, the Alien Enemies Act. Passed in 1798 during a time of impending war with France, the act granted the president sweeping powers. It allowed him to detain and deport non-citizens deemed a threat to national security. The act, rarely used in modern times, had been invoked by President Trump. He argued that it was necessary to address the perceived threat posed by certain groups of immigrants. Critics of the act argued that it was a relic of the past. They said it was ill-suited for addressing contemporary immigration challenges. They pointed to the act's vague language and lack of due process protections. These factors, they argued, made it ripe for abuse and discrimination. The ACLU, in its lawsuit, challenged the act's constitutionality. They argued that it violated the fundamental rights of immigrants. The Trump administration, however, defended its use of the act. They argued that it provided a necessary tool to protect national security. The administration pointed to the rise of transnational gangs, like the Tren de Aragua, as justification for their actions. They claimed that many of the deportees had ties to this gang and posed a threat to the United States. The use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelan immigrants raised serious concerns about racial profiling and due process. Critics pointed to the Trump administration's history of anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies. They argued that the focus on Venezuelan immigrants, particularly those accused of gang affiliation, was politically motivated and lacked sufficient evidence. For the deportees who landed in El Salvador, the journey marked the beginning of an uncertain and potentially perilous chapter. Instead of finding refuge or a chance to rebuild their lives, they were met with the harsh realities of El Salvador's overcrowded and often dangerous prison system. President Bukele's decision to imprison the deportees, many of whom had fled violence and persecution in Venezuela, sparked international condemnation. Human rights organizations criticized the conditions in El Salvador's prisons. They highlighted issues like overcrowding, inadequate sanitation, and rampant gang violence. They argued that imprisoning the deportees without due process or consideration for their individual circumstances violated international law and basic human rights. The deportees, many of whom had families and lives in the United States, now faced an uncertain future in a country they had left behind. They were cut off from their support systems and vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. The deportation drama of March 2025 exposed deep flaws in the U.S. immigration system and raised troubling questions about the Trump administration's disregard for the rule of law. The use of the Alien Enemies Act, the secrecy surrounding the deportation flights, and the willingness to circumvent court orders signaled a dangerous erosion of democratic norms. The fate of the deportees caught in this web of legal and political maneuvering remained uncertain. Their plight served as a stark reminder of the human cost of a broken immigration system.